Hi everyone, John here with Fountain Pen Love, and today I want to talk about vintage inks, and specifically Sheaffer inks. Now, you probably recognize this iconic yellow and blue box from, well, it's just been around for quite a while, but there's other Sheaffer inks out there as well, and pretty much all Sheaffer inks are called Scrip, so I'll probably just say Scrip from now on. So I want to kind of give you a brief history of them, how to identify some of the different inks and packaging, specifically boxes, and just give you a little information. So consider this fun and informal, but still hopefully informative. So let's dive in. Sheaffer started making Scrip in the early 1920s, and this here is a bottle of some of the earliest Scrip that I know of. I haven't actually been able to find it in any literature or advertisements, but from what I can tell, this is one of the first ones, probably from 1922 or 1923. After that, they started making different labels, still called Scrip, and this one in particular, and you can see I have this is a 2-ounce bottle, this is a 16-ounce bottle, exact same labels. One thing about these are from the late 1920s, probably 28, 29 or so. You can see they have this kind of like a torch on the side here, and there was a series of labels that had this torch, and then some also had people on the sides. I think the people were a little later, so they're from the early 30s, whereas the torch I think is a little earlier, from the late 20s. Might be switched, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. You can also see this gorgeous box is really for a bottle just like this, and this very pretty S, very stylized, and just very eye-catching in general. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to show you. One thing I mentioned in my video about Parker inks that I'll do again here, anytime I open one of these boxes, I use something thin and flat like a popsicle stick. You could also use a letter opener, and basically that just helps keep this flap from tearing when I stick my finger in there. So there's some literature inside here showing the latest pens of the days, and again we have this bottle here, exactly the same as this, but this is the box that goes along with it. So I love these old boxes. The bottles are great, but for some reason having the boxes as well really makes me happy. So yeah, that's what that looks like. The one thing I will also say is these all had cork stoppers. They didn't have screw top lids, and that's very common. I think that's all that was available in the 20s and 30s, for at least part of the 30s. You'll find corks, a lot of times they don't seal very well, which means the ink has evaporated. This one's actually stuck inside, so the ink is still in there. I've never tried to take it out. I don't want to lose this ink, so I just leave it alone and stick with that. It probably had a topper on it like this at one point or another, but it's long since fallen off and disappeared. So these are what I refer to as the torch labels or the people labels, depending on if they have a torch or a person on them. And this is a very specific era in Scrip ink. Like I said, the 1920s and early 1930s. Now, in the mid to late 1930s, they switched to these brown boxes, brown labels, and this kind of marked a big change in Scrip. In these inks, they were just called red, permanent red. This was, let's see, washable blue, but here they might still have had the same names. This is permanent jet black, but they switched to a numbering system as well. So let me quickly describe the numbering system and how you can tell what it means. So for Scrip's numbering system, there's going to be a few different numbers. Let's go ahead and take a look at this, for example. So this is 54. Now the first number is going to tell you the color of the ink. So this is permanent royal blue. That's going to be number 5. So anytime you see an ink that starts with a 5, it's permanent royal blue. The second number is going to be the bottle size. So this is a 4, meaning it's a 4-ounce bottle. You'll see all of these that are 2-ounce bottles end in a 2. So number 11 is peacock blue. Number 2 means a 2-ounce bottle. It also carries over to these larger bottles. So this is a 32-ounce bottle, and you can see it's number 432. So number 4 is washable blue. 32 means 32-ounce bottle. Similarly, this is number 232, which means it's number 2 is permanent blue black. 32 is a 32-ounce bottle. So that really started in this era when they switched to these brown boxes and bottles. A lot of times it doesn't say on the outside, you have to look on the bottle itself, but eventually it becomes very standard and is on the box and the bottle as well. So if you ever see a box or bottle of Scrip, you can easily look at it and see what the number is, and so should no longer be a mystery. Hopefully you can figure out what it means now. Fortunately, most of them say the color of the ink right on the box or the bottle, so you don't have to worry about that. They also say what size it is. So it's really just a kind of a mysterious code that now is not so mysterious. So starting in the mid to late 40s, they switched to these brown labels, and these didn't last for very long, pretty much 4 to 5 years or so, but they have a very specific look to them. This particular bottle is from Canada. It says Scrip on the glass. It's embossed, looks really nice. We have this nice blue label here. This 4-ounce box and bottle here. Let's open it up and take a quick look at it. One thing I do want to note about these is this has the introduction of the Scrip well, which is a very popular feature with these bottles. People still love them today. And basically what this does, I'll show you in a close-up. It has a lip inside here. You can tip the bottle, fill that up with ink, and then you just dip your pen into that little section there instead of having to go all the way into the bottle. Makes filling very convenient, much easier, and this is a feature that Scrip had, I think still had up until fairly recently, and people loved it. So as you can see, the bottles are brown label, look a lot different from these in both shape and labeling. So pretty much they switched from this kind of narrower at the top shape to a much more wide mouth shape, and that carries through into all these different years of Scrip. So that's the 4-ounce bottle. We also have the 32-ounce bottle up here, and you can see this thing is full of ink, nice big distinctive brown label on it, and easy pour spout at the top. So large bottles like this were made for offices, for banks, for schools. So when fountain pens were the only option, they had to refill a lot. So instead of buying lots of small bottles, they would buy large ones and either refill the small bottles or inkwells or whatever else that they had, and people would have enough ink to last them through days, weeks, months of daily use. So the brown bottles were really just made through the late 1930s. At that point, I think in 1939, we switched to this very distinct yellow and blue pattern and box, and stick with this pretty much through the life of Scrip. This is what most people know when they think of Scrip, and let's go ahead and talk a little more detail about this. Now, the first Scrip boxes that look like this were branded with this ChemoPure, and I don't really know what ChemoPure is. I think it's just saying that it's chemically pure, but that lasted for about 3 or 4 years, and then they dropped the whole ChemoPure thing. I think Scrip liked to try random things because they had a lot of different branding things on here. In the future, they went to RC35, which is a pretty big thing for them, but that's a little off topic. So ChemoPure went until I think 1930, 41, 42 or so, and they dropped that and basically just went to regular Scrip. For pretty much all of the 40s, this is what the boxes look like, this nice yellow and blue. Now, with one exception, we did have during World War II this Scrip called it V-Black, and what this was meant to write letters to soldiers overseas. Apparently it was a formula that photographed well, and what they would do, they would take the letters, photograph them, scan them onto film, or take that photograph onto film, ship the film overseas, which was a lot cheaper, took a lot less weight, a lot less volume, less fuel to ship rolls of film than it did stacks of letters. So they had this special ink that was made during World War II. For some reason, I haven't ever really figured it out. There are two colors of box, even though it's the same exact ink. So Scrip had this V black, like I said, had this yellow box, also, or this yellow box had this tan box. There is a chance this may be just faded and the yellow has gone away, but if I remember correctly, the label on this, oh, it's bright yellow. So maybe the color has just gone from here, but I kind of doubt it because this is still unchanged. Anyway, that's getting off on a tangent here and gives me something to research. But basically, you'll see this had the special color instead of a number, it was V. So this is V2, this is V4, V16, and V32. So just like all of their other inks, they were made in 16-ounce bottles and these big 32-ounce bottles. This one's kind of interesting. Again, very big lack of consistency here, but that's kind of how things used to be. Here, this has the nice black, white, and yellow label. This has something that looks just like a normal Scrip label, but it still says V black on it. So you never know what you're going to find. That's one of the things. It's always interesting to see what's out there, and there's always variations on everything. Now, as I mentioned, the classic yellow and blue box lasted throughout the 40s and into the 50s. This particular box is from 1952, and you can tell because it has this great artwork on the top showing the Sheaffer snorkel dipping into that inkwell there. So a couple of very iconic Sheaffer things paired in one graphic. I do have this interesting box from the same era as this. This is a little bit newer, but again, it shows the snorkel dipping into ink. The interesting thing about this is if you open it up, the bottle's plastic instead of glass. So this is the only one of these I've ever seen. I'm sure there's more out there, but I've seen a lot of vintage ink bottles, and this is the only one from the 50s that I've seen that's plastic. So you can see a very similar, well, exact same design, exact same size, just this is plastic, this is glass. So I thought that was pretty interesting. This box also is fairly unique. You don't see too many of these larger boxes with big graphics like this on them. So as a collector, when I saw this one, I had to snap it up because I'd never seen one like it before. So again, the large 32-ounce and 16-ounce sizes were made throughout the life of Scrip in the 1940s and 50s. Towards the 60s, they start to change the box design just a little bit. This is from the early 60s. It has this RC35 in it, which you can see on the back here. That was available beforehand as well. And basically what RC35 is, it was something that was in the ink. So if it got washed away, washed off of a page, it would still fluoresce under UV light and let you see what was written there. So kind of a security feature, they called it, I think. Similar to what some inks are doing today. They were just way ahead of their time, or maybe people today are just copying. Either way, neat, but not very useful unless you really had a specific use for it. Later in the 60s, Sheaffer switched to a little bit more modern look. So you could see the colors definitely changed. The yellow and the blue became lighter and more pastel. One thing I do want to point out is 1964 was a significant year if you're trying to date any of these boxes. Sheaffer, which previously was with an S, Sheaffer's Scrip, became Sheaffer Scrip. So anything that just says Sheaffer, you'll know was 1964 or newer. Whereas if it still has the S on it, it's pre-1964. This particular bottle and box is from like 1961, I think. So after 64, in my opinion, things got a little more boring, a little more, they just don't look as nice. They don't have that vintage feel to them, but they're still old vintage ink. I will show you here The box, or sorry, the bottle, still the same classic design, still has the well built into the side here. Still the same ink, just the packaging looks a little bit different. So I hope you found that helpful and informative. Again, just a brief overview of Scrip inks made by Sheaffer. If you do come across any of these and want to collect them, they are a lot of fun. As I mentioned, lots of variations, lots of different little things you can look out for that make them either unique, like a plastic bottle and different box, or just classic colors like peacock blue. So Scrip has a lot of great colors. Feel free to use them as long as they don't have mold or sediment in them. I use them fairly often and really enjoy using vintage inks. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Happy writing.